since the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was passed in Paris in 1948 on December the 10th, we have fostered the observance of this day not only in the United States, but throughout the world.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 10, 1948. This extremely influential document set a standard for international human rights and is still regarded on a high scale.
The chair of the Commission on Human Rights and a member of the drafting committee was former United States First Lady Miss Eleanor Roosevelt. For almost 2 years, Eleanor worked tirelessly to make sure that the document was not only accurate and just, but also written in plain language so that the average person would be able to understand it. Throughout her life, Eleanor was always conscious of minorities, the underprivileged, and those who have been mistreated. Because of the important work she was involved in, Eleanor has always been referred to by her first name, which is an uncommon way to refer to a woman in history.
Anna Eleanor Roosevelt was born on October 11, 1884, in New York City. Orphaned at a young age, Eleanor was sent to boarding school in England. She returned home to the United States in the early 1900s, and in 1903 she got engaged to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, her distant cousin. Before becoming president in 1933, Franklin was a governor in New York. As First Lady, Eleanor used her previous knowledge as governor's wife to advocate for victims of discrimination such as Marian Anderson.
Marian Anderson, an opera singer, was the country's third highest concert box office draw. However, Anderson was still subject to the racial bias of the time. When she traveled in the United States, she was restricted to colored waiting rooms, hotels, and train cars. When Anderson's manager tried to secure a performance at the Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., the Daughters of the American Revolution, who owned the hall, refused to accommodate Anderson.
When Eleanor caught wind of this situation, she dropped out of the DAR in protest. She wrote, "I am in complete disagreement with the attitude taken in refusing Constitution Hall to a great artist. You had an opportunity to lead in an enlightened way, and it seems to me that your organization has failed." She later led efforts to have Anderson perform on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. This was an early step in promoting human rights.
Before World War II, international human rights standards were not well established. When the war ended, Nazi war criminals were not charged with violations of human rights because international crimes against humanity were not actually illegal. The League of Nations was a group of nations that formed together after World War I in order to try and establish peace so that another world war would not break out. As a result of the atrocities of the two world wars and the failure of the League of Nations, the United Nations was created. The purpose of the United Nations was to maintain international peace and security by whatever means necessary.
One of the UN's first actions was the creation of the Commission on Human Rights. The purpose of the commission was to draft a series of documents defining human rights. Eleanor Roosevelt was a key member in the first drafting committee of the UDHR. The original document contained 48 articles pertaining to individual rights. These were later consolidated into 30 articles for the final draft.
As chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights, or the CHR, Eleanor guided her colleagues in the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document that was devised to guarantee the rights of every individual in the world. Without Eleanor's prior experiences with politics, the document may not have been as we know it today.
Before his presidency, Franklin Roosevelt fell ill in 1920, and Eleanor became his surrogate in the Democratic Party politics. Eleanor's political activities put her in touch with many key leaders to whom she expressed her opinion of women's rights in politics. By 1928, Eleanor had become one of the most influential women in politics.
Eleanor was active in political affairs throughout her husband's presidency. Norwich University history professor Rowley Brucken said in an interview,
"And what makes her unique or different than even a lot of other human rights activists at the time is that, having just gone through the Great Depression, she saw that civil and political rights were important for Americans to have, but they also needed to have economic security too."
Eleanor's experiences helped her form opinions on the treatment of individuals, thereby allowing her to become a key leader as chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights. Her opinions were always of the same nature, that all human beings deserve mutual respect and guaranteed rights. Eleanor's assertiveness firmly established her role in the world of politics, which was a very difficult feat for women of that time period.
She was a very good debater, And when in meetings, UN meetings of the Human Rights Commission, which she chaired, the Soviet delegate would often be in conflict with her about various philosophical and practical issues in the UDHR. And she really stood her ground, which made her, I think, a role model for a lot of young women, or middle-aged women at the time. It showed that women could really be active on the world stage, be skillful diplomats, and hold their own.
Eleanor's persuasiveness greatly helped in the efficiency of the drafting committee, as it took the commission a little under 2 years to draft and edit the now famous UDHR. As Eleanor once said in a speech to the General Assembly,
"This Universal Declaration of Human Rights may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere."
Meaning that this global document would be influential on human rights for everyone in the world. The Declaration's simple language ensured that its words would be accessible to everyone, and was later translated into over 350 languages to further its effect on the world.
The Declaration is separated into various parts, including a preamble and 30 articles outlining basic human rights. The preamble describes the UN's intentions in the creation of the Declaration. It also helps affirm the idea that because the Declaration is not a law-binding agreement, it is the responsibility of nations to enforce and uphold them. The Declaration itself has inspired many legally binding international treaties on the basis of human rights.
the articles outline rights such as the right to freedom and equal treatment, as well as the right to marry and have a family. The Declaration encompasses all different kinds of rights, and although some may seem unnecessary to include, like Article 24, which states that you have the right to a paid vacation, the CHR believed that it was necessary for them to be guaranteed to all as basic human rights.
Article 29 may be seen as the most important of all the articles in the Declaration. It states that everyone must respect the rights of others, the community, and property. This article connects individuals to the community, not as bearers of rights, but as bearers of duties to others. In order to claim our own human rights, we need to protect the rights of others.
The UDHR is still today a very important document. It contains an ageless view of history. It condemns past atrocities and past dictatorships and advocates a democratic society. It is also the basis for many current international courts and their constitutions. In addition, Amnesty International, a global organization, has made its mission statement to support and advance all the rights of the UDHR.
Many people have spoken to the importance of this document. The Declaration embodied the hope for a new era of human rights protection after the end of the Cold War. In general, the Declaration became synonymous with the turn to individual rights in international law, and whenever there was a sense of crisis because of institutional blockades or challenged foundations, the Declaration received new and increased attention. It symbolized unity in an increasingly fragmented and contentious institutional and political environment.
However, it has received various criticisms concerning the motives behind its creation and why the document is viewed differently today in contrast with how it was perceived when it was first adopted. One criticism focuses on the content of the Declaration. Some believe that the UDHR's creators have confused absolute human rights with social and economic ambitions. For example, the Universal Declaration ranks the rights to periodic holidays with pay no differently than the right to life, freedom from slavery, and freedom of religion.
Another objection to the UDHR claims that the articles are too overreaching and impossible to enforce. Professor Brookins says,
Certainly one main criticism is that it is voluntary. There are no enforcement mechanisms built in.
because the UDHR is not legally binding, its values cannot be forced upon nations' governments.
Despite its denunciation, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is arguably the most influential international document in modern times. Since its adoption, the UDHR has inflicted extensions and creations of proclamations and treaties. It has been the center of reference for political struggles around the world. The UDHR has proved to be an inspirational aspect in world history. For example,
It inspires the civil rights movement in the United States that tries to use the UDHR as a lever to get federal courts to strike down racist laws. Those who want to remember the Holocaust, to see the Holocaust as a grievous violation of human rights.
in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, it isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it.